You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hi. Okay, so today I'm joined by Dr. Alex Golden, functional MD and co-founder of Zesty Ginger. Dr. Alex and her best friend and business partner, nurse practitioner Megan Blacksmith, are known for combining functional medicine and mindset practices to help us balance our hormones and live our best lives. They are passionate about teaching women about how to significantly improve their hormonal health and try new things to positively impact their lives. They believe that in order to fully heal our bodies, we have to commit to a lifestyle approach to health and live with the natural cycles of our bodies instead of fighting them. Dr. Alex trained at the University of Chicago after a long personal battle with chronic pain and a myriad of hormonal health concerns. She details that journey and those concerns for us on the show today. We also talk about the intersection of health and life, how to thrive rather than survive, and how to advocate for ourselves and our health. Dr. Alex shares with me all that she's learned about how the mind and body are connected and the importance of looking at a person's entire lifestyle when working with them on their health. This conversation surprised me a bit, so tune in after the show to find out why. And here's Dr. Alex. Hey, Dr. Alex, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
It's so funny when I connect with people that I've found specifically through TikTok. It's like, I feel like I know you, but then you're here in person and I'm like, well, actually you don't. So,
yeah. I know, it's so funny. I feel the same way with people with podcasts because I'm a big podcast person and I like listening while I'm doing stuff. And I always feel like I know someone. And there have been times where then I hop on the phone with someone and I just start talking and I realize, oh, wow, they don't have the same thing, like information about me.
Right.
So I definitely hear you.
Yeah.
It's nice on the internet that way.
It is. So, all right. So speaking of, I did find, initially your account on TikTok and then moved over to Instagram and I've explored your website a bit. First I have to ask, what does Zesty Ginger mean? What is this name about?
Zesty Ginger. Actually, so there's multiple layers of this story. However, we were actually slated to do healthy ginger, and it was because we really like ginger as a healthful food and supplement, and because we talk about inflammation and the context of the cycle and central nervous system health and brain health. We really liked it. And then it was also kind of funny that Megan's a redhead, right? And then kind of lo and behold, it turned out that was already taken. So then we thought, what is the feeling that we want to help women experience? And we have a 3-part framework as part of Zesty Ginger when we sat down and really thought, what is the journey that we believe we have gone on and what are we really doing at the broadest level? This is like the 30,000 foot view. And really for us, it was education, right? Because if we understand what our body is doing, how it's communicating with us, and feel like we are understanding that, like the context of what's happening and what it means, then it goes to the second part of that framework, which is empowerment. When we understand the conversation being had, then we know how to meet ourselves with things that support us and optimize our body and optimize our health and experience of life, right? It's just a natural outflow of the understanding. And then the third part really is the whole point of doing it, which is enjoyment, right? So education, empowerment, and enjoyment, because really the whole point, in our opinion, of getting healthy and feeling empowered in your own life and standing at the helm of, I am directing my life and I am the authority in it, in all categories of life. Then from there, the whole point is to really enjoy it. And we were thinking of words that represented that kind of thing. And, things are commonly used, like, health and words like that. But really, we were like, we don't just want health. What we want is not survival. What we want is thriving. And we like the word zesty because it's a little bit unusual, not used as commonly, but it does get at the heart of really what we're going for, which is like, where's that zest for life? Where's the passion? Where's the creativity, the productivity, the passion, even high libido? Like, these are all thriving activities that we want. And yet many of us are living in survival mode from an internal place. And because of that, together we decided that represented what we're going after. So from all those levels, that's how we got to Zesty Ginger.
Yeah, it's catchy and it's memorable. And, initially you see Megan and you go, oh, she must be the Zesty Ginger. And then you're like, well, maybe there's a play on words here. It's cute. I like it.
We always joke that she's the ginger and I'm the zesty because I'm just a little bit more like spark pluggy. Though, over the years, we've been together as best friends and business partners for long enough that we haven't fully merged into one blob, but it's getting there.
Yeah. So Dr. Alex, tell me a little bit about why, what's your why? Why are you in this? Why are you doing this?
That's a great question. Yeah. 'Cause it really does come back to that, right? The identity, and we can talk about that from a brain-based approach to health and to life. Part of that is identity, and part of what fuels identity is the why behind who we are becoming. And for me, it's been a process, and it's certainly been clarified over time. But what really happened was that I had period issues starting when I was 11. And I had a pretty similar experience to other women where essentially my mom was like, oh, okay, this is what happens for women. This is how it goes, especially in our family. We've all had really bad cramps and things like that. That's how it is. But you can stay home from school, because I would even just like get nauseous and throw up and stuff. I was in a lot of pain. And ibuprofen, Tylenol, heat pack, that kind of thing. My whole family's Russian, and so I've always had a little bit of that ancestral side of my mom would do herbs and different things like that, but not I don't mean like supplements, more just like tea and things like that. So that started. But really, I was like, this is what it's like. So I just believed her, and I could see all the stuff that she had been through with hers, and I was like, okay. And then I got to college, and I was a piano performance major. I was going to be a piano professor. Both my parents are professors, and that's when I started having more and more pelvic pain. So instead of during my period, then it started being more and more of the month. And then it got all the time, and it became really severe where I had a hard time sitting, clothes touching, like waistbands cutting into. I couldn't wear jeans. It was really uncomfortable. I would get like different cushions to sit on. Going to the bathroom was uncomfortable. Intimacy things. All of that became more and more of an issue. And I started looking for solutions because I was so surprised. I was in college. I can see everyone else is having a good time doing college stuff. And I was progressively getting worse and worse and more dysfunctional in my actual life. And so I went to the regular doctor there in college, and he was like, I don't know what to tell you. Here's ibuprofen. And then he said, we could do birth control. And so that started a whole couple years where I was just going to different providers, getting lab work. They said, I'm fine. There really shouldn't be this level of pain. Nothing's really going on. You look fine to us. And it was mostly just like, here's birth control and kind of symptom management things. And really none of it was really helping. I kept getting worse. And then with birth control, I like at the time I was totally fine. I was like, that's what I need to do, right? I grew up with a very kind of that old school mentality of whatever the doc says is what the authority is, right? And so I was doing that and following what I needed to be doing, I thought. And really I could see that the birth control was making other things worse. So really impacting my moods, impacting my energy levels. And so the whole thing wasn't really working. And so that's why I was going from provider to provider, and trying to get answers. And the more I did that, kind of the more desperate I got. Because I really wasn't getting many answers. It really was, and that's why on social media and stuff, we really speak to that because it's so common. Oh, your labs are fine. Sorry you feel that way, and now please leave, right? Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what happened time and time again. And that's when I started doing kind of my own reading, and this was long enough now that this was like forums, and this was even before like blogs became a thing, right? So chat forums and things. And so I was starting to read about things and going to the medical literature and realizing like I didn't understand any of the words. And so I'd sit around and piece together sort of medical word by medical word. And at some point I said, this was 3 years in about, I said, my gosh, someone's got to be doing a better job than this. Like, I can't believe that this is considered normal, mm-hmm. that this is the best that we have. Mm-hmm. And so then I switched gears, and I still finished out my piano performance degree. However, then I started taking classes, applied for medical school, went to medical school, did residency, did a fellowship, and finished. So I did end up becoming a pain doctor, which is what I wanted to do for the more conventional side. But the whole time, as I was going through the conventional MD life and learning all of that, I also knew from my belief, from my experience, I was like, this is great. And there's some amazing things here, right? Especially for life-saving things. Conventional medicine is phenomenal. If I have a traumatic accident, I definitely want to go to the hospital, and I definitely want them to do everything that we do. Like, I have a lot of respect and value for providers. However, I always knew it wasn't going to be the answer to everything. And so on the back end, that's where I got really interested in functional medicine. And so that was taking courses, reading classes. I worked for a functional hormone testing company, working directly with providers to help interpret labs. So I was a consultant. And so in addition to the things that Megan and I started doing over this period of time, I also got access to see thousands and thousands of other labs as well. And so over time, I supplemented that with all of the functional things that I was exploring and learning. Mm-hmm. And then really recently, over the last couple of years, Megan and I have gone even further to realize that functional medicine, as great as it is, there's still limitations there. There's still a hefty amount of focus on the pill for the ill sort of model, except for it's like supplement and functional lab work a lot of times. And people are like, just tell me what supplements to take, or give me, foods to eat, and then I'll do it and I'll be healthy. Mm-hmm. And while that's also very powerful and we have a lot of respect for that, there's the whole person and their life and all of the other things that go into that. And so really now what we identify with as strongly as we have with anything else in the past is a concept called transformational medicine. Who are you at the root cause, foundational, most powerful you level, right? That takes everything about you into account, because just like that pill for an ill, you can't shove, a diet onto, this happens all the time, right? And it happened to me. They're like, do a really strict elimination diet or do the SIBO diet or fill in the blank. There's a million things, AIP. And then that person, and this was me as well, you're cooking 3 meals a day, you're like trying to find all this high quality food, you're spending time cleaning up after yourself, and really, while you're doing something very good for yourself potentially, all the second guessing, all the doubting, all the stress, all the wondering if it's going to work and feeling like nothing ever works for you, right? All of that. And so to say to someone who hates cooking and hates being in the kitchen, hey, I need you to do something that adds 20 hours of being in the kitchen to your week, and then the person's just be like, oh, well, this authority said, right? And I have to make myself do it. That is exactly what most of us do. We're trying to muck around with the external puzzle pieces of like, if I can just cook enough, then my health will be good, and not taking into account all of these other things. What makes us feel good? What works for us? What is our history, right? All of that stuff has to be taken into account. So that's really where we see the future of medicine. And that's my why. Basically, I think that we could be doing a way better job helping people live lives that are fulfilling, that they like themselves in. And when you have all those pieces, health is a natural extension of that, because really what a lot of people miss is we want to have good health, but really when you have good health, that's just the foundation. That's a springboard for the rest of your life. And so it has to come cohesively together in order to really feel good and really get us to the point where we are standing in our empowerment, whether that's physical symptoms that we have, how we talk to ourselves, how we interact with our kids, our bosses, our businesses that we run, all of that together.
Yeah. I just,
There's a lot there, right?
Yeah, there is. And really what's just like screaming at me though is I know of you and Megan doing this, and I know of a few others, like a few. I can think of 3, maybe.
Yeah.
And I just like what I started with, what's screaming at me is like, why does this have to now be this niche, like just a couple of people out there doing this? Like, it just seems like this should be the way. It's very frustrating.
It is. And we totally agree. And is actually getting to something that, at each point, it's like you up level and you change. And what you're saying is absolutely true. And though we've been doing this for coming up to a decade at this point, we are shifting more and more of our focus to provider education because of that exact same thing. Megan and I alone, no matter how big we got, no matter how many books we wrote, we can't help everyone just because, let's put this into context. The CDC, so, however you feel about that, but governing body, is the statistic as of now, I think they did this 2019, later than world things happened. But they looked at women's health and said 9 out of 10 women have debilitating symptoms that impact their cycle month after month. So out of every 10 women you meet, nine of them are struggling at any given time. That's a crazy amount of people, right? That there's just no way. So good intentions or not, there's just too many of us. The other aspect of that, not everyone's going to jive with Megan and I, right? And so with all of these things, part of this process, unfortunately, I think this is what you're getting at. Why is it so hard? Is because people want very clear delineations and distinctions between what they need to do. Tell me what to take, tell me what to eat, because that's how we've trained, in society. That's how we're taught to think, and that's conditioned as kids. And so the same thing is true. What's your stance on diet? It has to be clear. Or what's your stance on, what's the one supplement that works for this? Like, people ask us that a lot, or they're like, what's the supplement that replaces birth control? Well, there isn't, because if there was, don't you think they'd be selling it to you, right? You tailor it to each individual person, but the sound bite for each of these not as clear, and people don't like that. I think a lot, for many reasons, and I think our brains are like this. We're trying to make meaning out of things. So the more it can fit neatly into a box, then it's easier for us to be like, I see, I can handle, I can kind of wrap my brain around this, and I can make it very comfortable for me. But that's not really how life is health is not separate from life. And just like we don't have like a stance on how to live life, the health has to be tailored as well. And so I think that's really why people struggle with it, because what we're saying is that there's a lot more to it, and it's all individualized. And this is a really tricky part. At some point, when you start to really address the full person, it's a collaborative, co-creative process between providers and the people who are seeking health, right? And that means taking responsibility. It means saying, hey, you know, that thing that you're saying, that's not going to work for me. And I know that because I'm willing to feel my emotions. I have looked at my beliefs. This is something that's important to me. I understand how it fits into my values. And, you know, I need more variety. I need more choices to address this in my toolkit. And then the provider has to have the wherewithal to say, this isn't about me. They're not rejecting, you know, a tool or a part of my toolkit. Now I need to respond with other things to meet them and make it all work together, right? And so that's a lot hard. I mean, do you see humans acting like that? Most of us don't, right? And that's why we're still kind of catching up, in my opinion. And there's a lot of people learning to live in a completely different way. And those of us who can see that, there, in my opinion, there's even more responsibility to model behaviors and living and thinking and sort of putting yourself out there in order to lead, rather than coming from a place of judgment towards, you know, why is it like this, which is a whole nother topic. And I think there's a lot there too, but you know, that kind of thing is very important. So with that, we want to train more providers. And so we're going to do practitioner trainings, and it'll be 7-day in-person retreats. Our first one is in May. And so we'll be building out. Basically, There'll be a lot more of us.
Yeah.
In the meantime, though, there's just a lot of factors at play. For example, because I'm an MD, I get to see the flip side of the equation. So while, you know, on our social media and podcasts and things like that, of course, we are talking to the people that we're serving, which is the patients, clients, those people. As providers, though, you know, most of my friends, or many of my friends, I wouldn't say most, but many of my friends are MDs, and it's really difficult. Basically, there's so many. First, the training's very difficult. You're taught all of that authority stuff that we grew up with, all of the disempowerment, all of the drink coffee and work through, you know, when you have 28-hour call shifts, like what are you going to do? You're going to get through it any way that you can. And so that gets powered even more. So people learn to shove down those emotions. You know, something happens to a patient and then you go on to the next case, or you go into the next room, right? And there's not emotional processing, there's not mindfulness. Now, I was lucky in that life pushed me that way before. So by the time I was in training, it was a vastly different experience for me. And I'm, you know, running between rooms, running codes, doing my parasympathetic tools, right, to calm myself down, get me out of stress mode, because I knew that that was going to impact my hormones more than anything. And so, but other people don't have that. And so then you go out and practice, and it's like, you got 15-minute appointments. You're not even given the toolkits for your own emotions and your beliefs and the way you approach stress in life and how you deal with feeling like threatened, right? Why is this person not getting better? I really wish they were. Like, I don't have any other toolkits. And then they're sitting there across from you going, it's not working.
Right.
And so it can be very threatening to the provider to be like, this is my self-worth. And really, as we know in self-development, self-worth is one of the most foundational problems that come up for people, right? Am I worthy? Am I lovable? Am I good enough? All of those things. And so they have all their own stuff, plus heap on, a couple decades of stress. And it's not a pretty picture. And so it's just as painful being the provider, actually, as it is being the patient. It's not talked about as much, honestly, but really that's the reality. So in my take, part of the teaching providers is really beginning to also heal that part of our society, because we need healers, but we need them to be empowered healers, not disempowered.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you took the time to clarify that and really explain it, because I think in that last bit there, you answered about 6 of the questions that I had in terms of, like, yeah, and you addressed it earlier, so I'll go back a little bit and then get to the providers. But, I think as a consumer of your social media and being in your Facebook group and this and that, it's one of the things that I was going to bring up to you is, I absolutely know that I'm in a place personally that I could benefit from probably being in that room with you and working with you directly. But in the interim, I've tried to consume as much on my own as possible. And it never feels like I see something and I go, yeah, I relate to that. But then I don't know what to do with it. Or I kind of dabble in the podcast a little bit, but that feels like I have to like start at the beginning. And like, it feels very much like exactly what you said. Ultimately, you're there and you're doing your job because it is so personal. It is so individualized. Like I really can hear and truthfully, I was frustrated by it, but now I can hear and really appreciate that, you can put your resources out there on the internet to the world, but at the end of the day, you're a doctor who has a patient, and that's a different relationship than any help that I could get from an Instagram post. And I hear that now, and I understand it more, because I think the other aspect of it is that, and I don't think you're running it now, the hormone program, the healthy hormone program. But, there was a time, this was like a year or two ago, that I looked into it, and I've looked into some others that aren't quite exactly what you do, but similar. I had a consultation kind of on a whim. I didn't even realize I was having one, not too long ago. At the end of it, she's like, okay, da-da-da. And I'm like, yeah, this all sounds great. And she's like, $3,000. And I'm like, holy, like, and I'm feeling like I'm totally bought in. I'm drinking all of your Kool-Aid. I totally agree. And I guess what I'm really coming around to say is I kind of came into it frustrated that it feels a bit inaccessible to me to really make it my own. But now I'm hearing you. It's really like, I wouldn't expect any other kind of doctor to be able to help me as authentically and as detailed and what is the word I'm looking for? Like I don't know, as individualized, unless I was actually seeing you as a patient. Do you hear what I don't know. I think.
Yeah, I absolutely think I think what you're basically saying is, at any given point, what is each person up for? But actually, before we go into it, let me ask you this. What's what prevents you from going and listening to the full podcast that has a bunch of free information?
Only that most of the podcasts listening to that I'm doing is interview prepping. I'm interviewing people, and I listen to time is really it. Yep. And I guess not knowing, just not knowing, okay, and maybe that is what you confirming it, like, just sort of feeling like I should go back and listen to the beginning, but not really knowing if that's what I need to do. So then I'm like, oh, am I going to go back to episode 1 and get to episode 50 and be like, well, no, I didn't, you know what I mean? I could just just not knowing where to start. Because it's a lot of information, and it's a lot of having to sort of connect your own dots, because I don't have you then there to go, is that what that means? Does this apply to me? You know what I mean?
Definitely.
So,
and I think that's basically what it comes down to. So I don't think that you can get better without having a provider to tell you exactly or answer questions directly, because let's give an example that's not health, as something that I'm dealing with now. So I have a goal, Megan and I have a goal to be speakers, right? And so I spoke with a coach that I am now sort of bought into working with for public speaking. However, the timing wasn't quite lining up for when I would start working with her. Now, so there's a couple choices then that it comes down to, is knowing what my life is. So I can honor, now's not the season for this kind of thing, right? However, then it comes, the next question is, well, how serious am I about public speaking? Because I could sit back and say, well, I won't work with her until X time. And because of that, I will wait. And that would be a perfectly reasonable thing to do, right? And then the other option is for me to say, in the meantime, this is so important. I'm going to go listen to her podcast. I'm going to ask her for some book recommendations. I'm going to, we have like over 11 seasons. We have over 300 blog posts. There's just so many ways, a bunch of highlights, a bunch of videos, all of that stuff, right? Guides on our website. So because of that, when I know that things are available to me, then books, everything, I just have at it, and that's my buy-in. That's basically the decision that I'm making, and that can also be true. So personally, I'm going with that one because I want the result, and I want it sooner rather than later. So that all comes back to my personal responsibility and autonomy, because here's the thing, like, it sounds nice to be like, I'm going to make my own health decisions, understand my body, know what to do about it, and feel really great. The downside of that is that then it is also on you for the result. And that becomes it's a kind of a hard look in the mirror a lot of times for people to say, am I taking action? Am I doing the things in my life that actually go hand in hand with what I say that I want to happen? And at the same time, there are really seasons. So I'm not even saying, like, there's times where I've just sat on something that I'm like, I know, but it's not happening now. And like that also, that's the beautiful part of the responsibility and the sovereignty that we have to really say, I am confident enough in my own thing that even if someone were to be like, you should address this now, I'd be like, okay, but I can't now. Like, I'm not going to. And so that kind of thing can really begin to build. And then it's these kind of day-to-day decisions that you make of, what am I really going to show up like, that then allows us to move forward. And I think to your point of, is it the right thing? That is a big topic that we talk about, because that habitual, asking the question of, am I going to waste time and it's not going to work? We've been taught to do that, where we're like, if it's not the right thing, I'm not doing it. But really with the flow of life, it's always like, you get a couple steps in, you tune in, you say, I'm going to take the time to listen to my emotions. What are my intuition saying? What's my gut telling me? Does this feel right? And then not make it mean anything if we're like, that wasn't what I needed, and now we're going to shift over here. And so all along the way, there's much more decision making and branching and kind of going, it's not this straight linear line that we all want it to be. Like, yes, I found my provider, they're the perfect one, it's the perfect price, it's the perfect way of communicating with me. Most of the time, that's not how it's going to go, right? But as long as we look for that and make everything else wrong, we often do end up feeling really, really frustrated and feeling like we're at the mercy of things rather than we're standing at the cause and we are really driving life the way that we want.
Yeah. Yeah, and you said it a little while back, and it's reminding me as you're talking, obviously just because we're talking about me now. It's like
or any fill in the blank on this with 1,000,010 things. So
yeah.
glad to see
you. So because yes, I can recall when I first started seeing your work and stuff and going, okay, you know what, I was like very newly postpartum and I wanted, here, do this, do that, do this. And you know what? And actually I realized I can't. I have a 2-year-old, I have a pandemic, I have a newborn. I can't do a meal plan right now. And then, coming to now, I don't know. I have to really, really reflect on this because I still don't feel like I'm in a place where I can handle much more than what I have on my plate. But I'm so uncomfortable and frustrated where I am, like physically and health wise, that it's I'm really trying to draw, like have one foot on each line, over the line, you know what I mean? And it's not working. And it's and I think what I'm coming to here now is that I don't want to put the work in. I want it. I want the results, but I don't want to do it, Dr. Alex. I don't want to do it.
To say. I mean, you and everyone else, right? Like me too. It sucks. I wish it was easier, and I wish it was clear, right? And I think when you honor that. So let's tie it back into what we were talking about before. To understand the struggles that providers have is in no way saying that you can't be pissed about the things that happen to you. I had to say, so to sort of continue on my personal story, that whole pelvic pain thing, then I started having generalized pain because sometimes the central nervous system does that, where it's basically like a car alarm. You jiggle the handle, the car alarm goes off. If someone tries to break into it, you get a car accident, you have a baby, you have surgery, fill in the blank, you have endometriosis, you have that, and then it generalizes. So everything hurt. And so I was going in and addressing that and all of that. And then we were trying to get pregnant, and it wasn't happening. And I went in and they were like, oh, sorry, we missed the endometriosis. You're going into menopause. You have 6 months to do IVF and you'll never have kids after that. So that was, it was so hurtful to me because I had spent years going into providers and fighting for, things to happen and trying to get someone to listen to me and feeling like I was ignored and people being like, I didn't at the time understand. And I don't even think they meant it that way. In chronic pain, there is, a role for addressing brain chemistry, and in conventional medicine, there is, the answer is antidepressants, right? However, to me at the time, because I didn't have any understanding and no one told me that, it sounded like it's all in your head, right? Because they were like, okay, crazy lady, have some Zoloft, right? Here you go. And I was like, my stuff is real. So it was very, very frustrating. So when I was told that, and then they were like, oh yeah, like this happened. And it was a different provider, and she didn't know that whole history. And so she was kind of like, why didn't she get it addressed, and that kind of stuff. And I had a really horrible interaction with it. The way I found out was I was getting a transvaginal ultrasound. So you're there, exposed. And then she came in, she's holding my chart. She goes, well, you're never going to have kids. She just throws the chart on the table. And I think she said she's probably not going to have kids or something like that. But it was just so traumatic. And so for me to sit there and go, oh, well, she was probably having a bad day. I know how this goes. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of things changing. That wouldn't have helped. Like, it wouldn't have allowed me to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm actually really, really hurt and angry and frustrated, and my heart's broken, and my dreams are broken, and my parents now have to deal with that, and the in-laws have to deal with that, and my husband has all sorts of feelings about his hopes and dreams of having kids and all of that, right? And so for me to deny my experience, I think, and I recently did a podcast about emotional and spiritual bypassing as the reason I think a lot of us stay stuck, is that acknowledging what's happening, even if you know, like, I have a role in this, or, you know, I have choices around this or whatever, that doesn't negate the fact that I am where I am. And what do I need to do to allow myself to feel this? And one of the processes that I really like for emotional processing is when I have a very strong emotion, kind of asking my brain, because it stores everything, when was the first time in childhood when I felt that emotion very strongly, right? And it's usually 2 to 5 or whatever. And sometimes if you don't remember back that far, your brain won't kick that out to you, like 3 to 7 or whatever it is. And I imagine myself as a kid, and how would I comfort that child? Because to us, you could be like, well, you're the one not doing blah, 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 or you always mess it up, or there's a million and 10 things we think about ourselves. But when we envision a child, that's drastically different, because then we are really, we're nicer, we give allowances, we hold them, right? Those are all the same things that we need, that we have habitually denied ourselves, and that was for a reason. We got taught to do that. A lot of us had parents that were like, stop crying, or whatever, you know, like that thing doesn't matter that you're crying about. All of these things that essentially you internal, external gaslighting. And so with that, you know, what you're saying is, once you really feel it, that's the GPS of, to program a GPS, you need to input where you're starting and then where you want to go. You can't just put in where you want to go. It doesn't know what roads to take you for, right? So for you to acknowledge where you are and what's really going on, then says, out of a million options that we have to get healthy, right? There's so many ways to do it. You could work with a provider, you could not. You could work with 5 providers, you could work with 1. You could work with a provider now, you could do it in a year and do stuff in the meantime. All of that works there's someone who has done it that way and it worked for them, right? But really the question is, what do I need now? And, you know, there's a lot of people in your shoes. It's like, how do I tiptoe into that? And often it begins to transform everything that we do. And that's why Megan and I have focused more and more on whole life as well, in addition to health, because it's not really different. When we are like, what do I need to do? I'm going to follow a plan, and that's going to be the thing that I do. A lot of times, the things in our life that we're doing is also a reflection of that. That's why addressing yourself as like the identity, the brain base, like, is your brain, who has your brain been wired to be from the identity that you perceive yourself, right? Those things, everything that we do then is impacted. So very likely, so what Megan and I have found in over thousands of women, you know, this is just such a pattern of people are following someone else's prescriptions in many areas of life. You know, make the Christmas cards. There was a year where Megan and I were working on this kind of stuff and really asking questions, and she's like, I don't even know why I sent out Christmas cards. Like, it's something my mom said was important. You know, she's like, it takes me like hours to do this thing when I don't even care about it. So a lot of times there's lots of busyness, there's lots of things to do. We're doing a lot of the runaround in our own head, second guessing, is this right? Am I being a good mom? Am I being a good partner? Did I do this, like, you know, social media thing correctly? All of that. When we begin to unplug ourselves out of all that external noise and really go to, where am I now, and how can I just start putting one foot in front of the other to get to where I want to be, knowing that sometime I'll take a step and change my mind and go another way, right? when I do that, then you also get to look around and go, a portion of this stuff is just going to go out the window. I don't care about it. It's not important to me. It's not in line with my values. Doesn't make me feel good. I'm going to let it go. And all of a sudden, people find all this time, right? And all this mental space to have clarity. That's not to say that there aren't seasons of life where you are truly very busy, and like with young kids and things in pandemic and building businesses, that's definitely true. But it's different to be busy doing the things and being the person you want to be than just doing stuff because you're on like the hamster wheel and not, right? And so even with going through residency and working 80, 90-hour weeks and all of that, Megan and I still built this business. Sometimes it was messy. Sometimes I took breaks. But because I was intentional, it was like, I have 10 minutes here. Let me write something or make a video or something. And that it wasn't my most productive. I'll tell you that. I wasn't running as fast as possible, but it got done. And now that's where I get to say, we've been doing this almost a decade, as opposed to being like, I'm just now starting because now my life is perfect enough that it allows me to do that.
Yeah. So how long ago was that experience with the doctor that threw the chart down?
That was over 6 years ago.
Okay. And I'm like, how did you get through that? It sounds like you've gone to therapy, but I don't know. So I'm curious. Like a lot of
I didn't go to therapy, but I went to my all of the things that you see us talking about. We get coaches, and I'm constantly reading books. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm learning all the time because I'm becoming an expert at being me and navigating my life. Now, truly, after that happened, I spent 6 months in bed crying and being depressed. So straight up, I'm not even, that's reality. And so when you see now and people are like, oh, that must have, people have different interpretations, right? She coped with it well. She must have had a lot of support, blah, blah, blah. You fill in the blanks. But really, in the grand scheme of things, it was just as messy as for everyone else. Now, this is a really great point, though, that I'm glad that you brought this up, because when it comes to decisions, that was such a pivotal time that even though I didn't see it this clearly at the time, it felt much more messy than this. What I know now is that period of time, and especially as I came towards the tail end of it, at some point, I had a decision to make. Either I was going to believe her and make decisions in my life from that belief, or I was going to say, that isn't what I want. That's not what I think is possible for me. And I'm going to fight for the life that I envision and what I believe is possible for me. That's really where it came to. And it was small little nuggets of thought here and there, but eventually that's the decision I made. And everything you see, that Megan and I were already working together, and we were still, obviously we've learned a ton over a decade, right? I had already, actually, what's funny about that is that I had been improving the last couple of years. So I think if I had done it earlier and had gotten all that information, it would have been much worse. But the reality was, I had to make the call, and I basically said, I don't believe that that's what I'm stuck with. And the programs that we have, the podcast, is all an outflow of that decision, right? I had to own it, and I had to fight for it. And I didn't have anyone like me to watch. There wasn't social media accounts, right? We just made it from scratch. And so that decision is what I mean when we are like, this isn't about anyone else. It's not about external factors. It's not about this. What am I going to make happen? And what am I willing to take responsibility for? That impacts everything. Basically, any relationship, any business, any health thing, that's what it comes down to, is that decision. It's that autonomy and the being at and I don't like the word control, but kind of like standing at the helm of that and driving the whole ship. And really, beliefs in the central nervous system are so powerful, because our brain, once we set it and we program it to have a goal, it will look for things and opportunities in the environment to do that. That's why you say, I'm going to get a red forerunner, and you start seeing them everywhere. Your brain is pointing that out to you. So I said, I'm figuring this out. And so my brain went to look for solutions, for answers, for information, and I found it. Took me years, and that's why Megan and I exist, because we don't think it should take that long for everybody. but I did it, right? And I did not end up going into menopause. My ovarian reserves started coming back. They started raising. My doctor was like, looked at me like I was growing a third head. And really, in the grand scheme of things, I was like, this is what I'm doing. And I showed up until it happened, right? Yeah. And from there, it really showed me that I'm capable of doing it. It's just that I have to allow myself to practice, to do it imperfectly, to get it wrong sometimes. And that is actually much, much harder, because making the decision is one thing, can also be hard. It wasn't, I didn't get there straight away, like I had said, but it's what happens after missteps. How often are we going to say, I give up? Really, there were times where I gave up, but I got back on the horse, right? And it was the same thing for chronic pain. Chronic pain, from a conventional standpoint, you don't get better from things like fibromyalgia and widespread pain of any cause. And I did after years and years and years and years and years. But I started working with my central nervous system, rewiring it, changing my relationships with myself, with how I think, how I view myself, how I live my life, and all of the other health things. Of course, like our Health Transformation Accelerator program has neurotransmitter testing, so brain chemistry, all of that across the board, hypnosis, meditation, and I got better. Right now, that exact formula may be different for someone else, and there's still a lot more. Obviously, that's part of my career, is to advance that kind of thing. But that was another example of, like, I'm unwilling to say I will have this condition and this experience, and that is absolutely what I'm locked into, because there's a concept called neuroplasticity. The brain rewires itself, and at some point I thought, well, why not? Right? Like, it's just, what if it wasn't as limited as I'm being told? And then I went and did it. It took me a while still. Like I said, I didn't have anything to follow, but it happened. And so all of these things are really to say, it's much more us, and it's collaborative. That's not to say we do it alone, though. And that's why Megan and I really want to have solid provider trainings, so that there's a lot more opportunity to work with people in different ways and all of that. But that is really the heart of it. It's the choice initially, and it's the choice every day.
Okay. All right. I get it. I do. And so now, and I appreciate you sharing so much about your story. I didn't know all of that about you, and I appreciate knowing it, and I want you now to take it and apply it now to someone listening and going, I'm in. Like, what about working with you and Megan, or doing a program with you? What can someone expect? I guess maybe, and I know I've got you only for a few more minutes, but just who's your ideal client, I guess, in a way? I don't know. That's a loaded question, I'm sure. And what are you doing? What does it look like to work with you, and what can they expect to get out of working with you?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's actually going to be lots of things coming up that we're doing this spring that are either very low cost. Like, one of them is going to be $20 and then, or free. So there's kind of a landmark challenge that we do that's really popular and really powerful. That's completely free. So all of that stuff's coming. And then, of course, our Health Transformation Accelerator will start after that, the program. So ideal client, really, women who are struggling with health issues where they feel kind of powerless to understand what their body is doing. So that is, we see people across the board. This is low energy, mood issues, PMS, that kind of anything in the hormone family, because while this is a brain-based program, really, if you go to the top of the chain, the decision maker and the part of the body that is going to dictate how everything else goes and how everything else is perceived, like supplements, is the central nervous system, right? So it goes back to there. And then anything that's under the thriving category, if you low libido, low kind of drive to poor energy during the day or poor sleep at night, all of these things, not thinking clearly, kind of sluggish memory, that kind of stuff. Any and all of that, we work with people across the board. What is common, though, to them is that they are interested in navigating their situation and learning their own body and life and bring that awareness in so that they can move forward. So that the way that we approach our programs is that you develop toolkits and then you begin to live your life, pulling out the aspects of your toolkits and then seeing what works for you in different situations. This is also why we teach people to read their own labs and to have an awareness of what their labs are doing, what it all means, because there's way too many women for us to help, right? To work with everyone. So it's one of those where we want to give someone the tools, empower them, and then have them go live their life. Right? This is not how do Megan and Alex get repeat clients. This is how do we let women go do their thing and, never have to see them again. Or, of course, people come back and people stay with it for Health Transformation Accelerator. People repeat it. So once you do one round, then you go on to the next level. Because like I said, it begins to build and they're like, oh, I have all this energy. What do I want to do with my passions, right? Like, what am I trying to impact in the world? And then they work on that. So while the 7-step process remains the same, what goal women apply it to changes. And so with that, you have to be committed to learning yourself, using the tools, using them, learning the labs. We're really not for people who want to sit back and sort of have the traditional, like, tell me what to do, I'll do it. And then when life changes or I have another baby, then I come back to you and you tell me what to do again. So we don't really have that kind of model. So really at the heart of who we work with is people who are interested in that kind of approach to life. Now, the things that are coming up, there's a whole bunch of really exciting stuff, I think. We have a habit masterclass, basically how to work with your own brain. So, and we did it specifically around that time because people get out of the gate January 1st. I'm going to go work out. I'm going to not eat out. I'm going to cook, right? They're trying to move the external puzzle pieces. And here's what it really comes down to is that it's easy to do the things we are. So if we're a runner, it's easy to run. If we're a smoker, it's easier to smoke. I'm not a smoker, so I didn't even think about smoking, right? We do the things that we are. So as we take the habits that we tend to fall off the wagon for time and time again, it's because they're not matched up with who we are or how we perceive ourselves. So the masterclass is going to help people interrupt the pattern. A lot of times there's guilt and shame and, we get stressed out and all of that. Interrupting the cycle, calming the central nervous system down, making it receptive and open to new information, and then beginning to establish intentionally and strategically in the way that the brain can understand the identity of the person who's going to effortlessly stick with that goal and stick with it for the long term, right? That's how it's a lot more, I guess it's a little less sexy than like, do this process in a habit. However, we all know how that goes. The quick fix is quick for a reason, but it's often not long lasting. And so this is a real true, like when we transform at an inner level, that habit just sticks around then until we intentionally set to change it. It's not like I did it and then life got busy and I stopped doing it. It's just, and even when that does happen when we approach it from an identity brain-based level, then we know how to respond. It just becomes a little dip, not a whole nosedive into like, screw this, I never get it right, or it never works, or whatever. So that's the masterclass, and that will roll right into the challenge. So it's a 4-day live challenge where you're really you're picking a goal and you are following the steps. So we have a whole lot of fun. There's a winner. For the challenge, it's all a group together and all of that. So that's all coming up. And then Health Transformation Accelerator will be open in February with all of that. And that really is the kind of comprehensive 7-step start to finish, all of that. But come join for the masterclass and or the challenge, because there's going to be so much there. I mean, we hear from people all the time, like even from last time when we mentioned it recently, we had multiple people messaging us like, I'm still doing the thing I said I was going to do. This is the longest that I've ever done it. So this stuff, we even need to go through the science. People have looked at this. This is not like woo. This is, taking the body into account, taking what we know about people into account, and merging it together in a way that works.
And the Health Transformation Accelerator, like that's the big one. That's the
big one. Yep.
All right. That's the really comprehensive, really looking at your charts and all of that. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. There's basically 2 tracks as far as lab work goes. So people can either get their own brain chemistry tested and get a customized plan, or there is a bundled supplement option that in one of the weeks, I explain exactly why that is the kind of customized to what the goals are, but not based off your individual lab work. So it supports the building blocks, the decision making, the signaling at the brain, the protecting from things like oxidative damage and stress and all of that. So there's a lot of thinking that goes into it. But, to your point, some people don't have the time, the resources, the even like emotional bandwidth to do labs right now. And from that standpoint, that's why we have choices. And this isn't, I can't do lab work, therefore I can't be successful. There's always another way to get at it. But this really gets at feminine flow when we're willing to say, not never, just not now. What am I going to do? How can I support myself? What fits into my life? And we talked about this already. It's less clean cut, so people don't, have the I know exactly what to do. But the difference is that then it's customizable to what you have going on in life. And to us, that's very, very important. Why have a program that helps people feel more calm and centered in their central nervous system, and then make them feel stressed about by saying, you do this now?
Yeah. I don't want a meal plan because I can't do it. You know what I mean?
We don't do meal plans.
Yeah.
There's no such. Yeah. There's just no such thing, right? So there are parameters, there's frameworks, there's ways of thinking about food. Well, we wouldn't touch a meal plan with a 10-foot pole. Neither one of us would ever follow one.
Right. Okay.
I eat the way I want to eat, and that changes every single day. The phase of my cycle that I'm in, whether I'm on vacation, whether things are going great, whether things are stressful, why would I do that to myself and cage myself in these parameters? Unless you, even if you made the plan, I don't even know why someone would stick with it if it didn't feel good in the moment to do. And I don't mean feel good I'm feeling a little lazy. There's times where we have resistance, and there's certainly ways to address that. But it's really different to say, why put yourself in that box if you don't have to, right? Just what if you had a very, very toolkit that allows you to say, today I get to choose from these, and this one's going to work. And then tomorrow you just choose differently.
Okay. And I just wanted to clarify with you, because I'm doing a lot of mental work. I'm doing a lot of mental and emotional work. I have a therapist. I see her twice a week. It's a whole thing with body image and food with me right now. And I don't know what the exact timeline for being postpartum is, but my son, my younger, is almost 2. And, you know, what kind of initially I guess not initially, what reignited my interest in someone like you or one of your colleagues was really struggling with everything you said, energy, drive. You know, I've literally not been able to see a pound come off of my body regardless of what I do, like the whole thing. And so then I'm going, well, is there something going on with me, with my hormones, with something that I would have no idea about on my own, or like I almost don't want to say it now that we've had this conversation, but like I was almost thinking like
someone else is probably thinking it.
Yeah, like I was almost feeling like, okay, I'm doing all this mental emotional work, I'm like trying all the things, maybe there's something medical or physically wrong with me that I don't know about, and or maybe there's an imbalance in my hormones or this or that. And now, like, you know, having this conversation with you, I know you address those things, but it really sounds like maybe just your passion is for almost the other, almost like, okay, let's really look at your life as a whole picture and not just going, hey, I'm going to give you a Dutch test, or I'm going to do this kind of test, and boom, 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 your vitamin D is low, take a pill. Like, and you know, because that sounds easier, but it doesn't sound like it's as impactful, you know?
Yeah, right. I mean, I think basically what you're getting at is, you know, if you look at it like slices of pie, and there's just different areas of handling. So there's physical body, emotional body, mental body, energetic or spiritual body, however you want to talk about it. All of those make up our experience of life, like the things that we see or perceive what's happening around us through. And really, you can get at health and life in different ways. So I just did recently a 4-part series about how my relationship with supplements have changed over time. And you can hear the pendulum has swung both ways. Sometimes I've been like, here's exactly how I'm going to tailor it. I'm going to get really strategic. I'm going to do lab work. And then there's been times where I've pulled back a lot more and gone much more heavy on the mindset and emotional stuff. Here's the thing, though. They are not separate from one another at its core, because every emotion and every thought we think, and especially habitually, so it becomes a belief and therefore a kind of a preset, like a filter that we see our life experience through. So if nothing ever works for me, nothing can, you know, the brain's like, okay, got it, that supplement, we'll make sure that supplement doesn't work. So when the only reason we know those things, like I feel bad or I feel shame about my body or what's happening in life, is because neurons fired, they released chemical messengers, and now you're perceiving that emotion or thought as, you know, your body let you know. So it always does come down to physically there's something has to happen, or you wouldn't even know about it, right? You wouldn't feel bad, you wouldn't think bad thoughts.
Okay.
So it's coming. So really, if I had to pick one, I would rather support beliefs and emotions, knowing that it's going to alter brain chemistry. People do this all the time. I'm not going to eat junk food. I'm going to take out sugar and I'll drop the weight. And yet every time they walk past the mirror, every time they walk past the window and see their reflection, their thoughts are, I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm not good enough, I always mess everything up, why does nothing work for me? Right? Those are junk thoughts. For your brain, it doesn't care if it's a Dorito or a Swedish fish or I'm ugly. It can't tell. It's not judging the inputs. Good. It's all input. Yeah. And that's why, like, really, if I had to pick, food is maybe like 15% of the equation. What we think, I'd set at 25 to 30. So I think it's probably more impactful, because think of what that does. If we can change the narrative in our head, all of a sudden everything that we do is augmented. The good food we eat, the supplements we take, the labs we do, all of that stuff can work because we don't have these blocks that say life can't be different for me. So doesn't sound like you're not on the wrong track. You're on the track that there's more path to go.
Yeah.
And I still have more path to go. We all have more path to go. So it does not sound like there's been anything wrong that has happened. You just are where you are, working on what you are working with. And if now with podcasting and all of that, it's more impactful to address beliefs because they also cross over for health and putting yourself out there, then that may be exactly where you need to be, right? I wouldn't know because I don't know the details, but
yeah,
that maybe that is the most impactful, and that's cool.
Yeah. It's funny. I was even, as you're talking, I'm thinking of even like, I don't want to say silly, but just a very simple example of how, I'm constantly like just telling myself, well, you're tired because you go to bed too late. It's like, imagine if I just started saying you go to bed at the exact right time. Like, you know what I mean? Just something as simple like switch there of, well, of course now I'm going to be tired because I believe I went to bed too late. It's like, you know what? It's not stopping me from going to bed at that time though, is it? I'm still going to bed at that time.
Right. Yeah.
And it's and like you said, like, wait, what did you say? Or like, we do the things that we are, it's like, I don't want to get up at 5:30. I don't want to get up at 5:30 to do all the things that I wish I had time to do during the day. So I don't know, maybe I go to bed at the exact right time, which, I at one point thought it was too late, but maybe I'm just misutilizing the time that I'm awake for. Like at that time, it's like, yeah, it's like shifting.
Exactly. So it was somewhere along the way someone told you, probably, what I'm hearing is, for moms, it's really great to wake up early so that you can get the things you want done before the kids wake up, right? We hear this all the time.
Yeah.
And so people put themselves in that box. Now, for some people, that works great. And there's some people whose circadian rhythm is like a little bit different. There's people who there's differences between us, right? And so that's it. For some people, that's really not going to be supportive. And if it habitually causes stress and then we can't do it, then the thoughts come, I fail, I don't do things right? As opposed to, there are plenty of people who work or do things at other times, naps or breaks, or they get a sitter, they may just make it work for them, right? And what that comes down to actually is the belief of can I decide for me? Like, do I actually believe I have the authority to make the decision, as if no one is judging you, because really most people are too worried about themselves to be thinking about us. And in the grand scheme of things, they're not living our life. So unless they're willing to be there at 5 a.m. when the baby's screaming, they don't get to tell us. But here's the thing. While that's true, and it totally makes sense that we've learned that, we still, at some point, it's a leap of faith to say, I'm going to believe me when I haven't in the past. I'm going to trust that I know what I need to do, even if it looks different. That's hard. I can really relate to this because I do things very differently. And I've had the you don't know what you're talking about and just stick to conventional medicine and all of that stuff. It's hard sometimes, but again, what am I being responsible for? I'm not responsible for their beliefs about me. I'm responsible for my beliefs around me, and I know why I do this. It's my purpose in life to serve women and to help this world. And I can't do that if I can't even make decisions for me. You know what I mean? Like, how powerful am I going to be? How impactful am I going to be? So if I feel eating on a different schedule than other people or making content on a different schedule, I'm going to do that.
Yeah. All right. You're hitting nerves. You're touching nerves. How am I going to impact the world if I can't even decide for myself what time I want to get up in the morning? It makes sense.
It's such a beautiful thing, right? Like our emotions let us know where our belief boundaries are. So what just happened there is that your brain has wired in certain beliefs and interpretations of the world. Now we bumped up against it, and then the emotional response was, hey, I'm letting you know we bumped up against a boundary. That's what triggers are. So if you're looking at something and you're like, God, that's really annoying. a lot of times it's because people are challenging our beliefs of what's going on. But then when you're like, well, the brain can be rewired, it's just constantly dynamic. We can either keep wiring it in or change it. Then really all we're saying is, thank you for letting me know where the boundary is, brain, so that I know what I need to go work on. And that's all it becomes. So it's neutral. There's not guilt, shame, all that stuff. It's just neutrality. It's just info.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I've totally kept you over, but Dr. Alice, is there anything, I'm sure there is, I'm sure there's 1,000 things, but is there any one thing that you would have asked yourself or would have wanted to really make sure you got into this talk today that I didn't ask you or you hadn't said yet?
One thing that I would share. Is that what you're?
Yeah. Share or just really want to drive home for anyone listening.
Yeah. The one thing that I've really been sitting with a lot is sort of the concept that we've been heading towards, which is what's right for me. And sitting, I think that right now, as a society, we're having more and more conversations about taking responsibility for the outcomes of our life and doing it that way. However, there's a lot of toxic positivity. Yes. And there's also well-intentioned folks. I do not think that they're meaning to be toxic. And part of it is really like, you can't always cover everything in a post, right? So I'm sure there's posts that I've written that are more like focus on that, because you're not going to cover every, base with every post. So there's lots of well-intentioned folks doing a lot of things. However, we as a society are still really scared of our emotions and like kind of the energetics of things that we pick up, like habitual fear or anxiety that's like stored in our body that we don't have tools to. We know about thoughts, which is how we all end up overthinking. There's a podcast episode coming out next week about that, actually. And we have been taught to think about our physical body, but addressing the emotional body and the kind of spiritual, energetic body, those are the things that I believe get really hampered. And those are the things that if we don't address them and release them, all the other habitual ways that we are like, I'm going to think positively, I'm going to rewire those beliefs. I think all that stuff is phenomenal. I wouldn't change it for the world. And yet we're scared to go into the darkness internally, right? We're scared to sit with the fear and the guilt and the shame until we can resolve them. And sometimes that takes a lot longer than we want. And so it's really easy to shove it down. And people will be like, oh, well, you've been thinking or you've been processing that for a while. Maybe it's time to move on. No one else can say that. They're not you. And so if we just keep sweeping under the rug, they're just going to be messing with us under the surface. So those things, yes, thinking positively, talking nicely to yourself, really, really great. And we still need to go into kind of the shadows of us, the things that have happened to us, and really honor those things and allow themselves to be released and then move forward. So it's always this game between positivity and acknowledging what is, positivity and acknowledging what is, hope, optimism, acknowledging what is, and you just kind of seesaw back and forth. It's really, I think that's a tough transition to make.
Yeah.
I think it's a hard thing to learn, but when we do, no one can then come at us and say, you need to do this or you need to feel this way, because we're like, no, I already know me.
Yeah.
Right? I'm in control here. Therefore, like, thanks for your opinion, but like, I'm not going to listen to it. Or that's a great point. Totally resonates. I will. Right. And so that's the kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's not
a really important
and
point.
It's not aggressive. It's just very like when you're like, oh no, that's not for, it's just, it's so what is that there, it's like you were saying before, the neutrality, like there's no real emotion. It's just, I know who I am and I know what I'm about, and thank you. Yeah. See you later.
Totally. I mean, yeah, you see it on social media all the time. I mean, once you start looking for it, it's kind of an interesting where people feel very threatened and want to tell you exactly what their side of the equation is or whatever. And it's just like, or you could just not fire off your thumbs. Like,
right.
If someone's just sharing about their own life, like, cool, do you? So,
Yeah.
but it's the inability to sit with the uncomfortableness that drives that, in my opinion.
Yeah. No,
So
I
that's
love
the
it.
deal.
I completely agree, and it's why I'm here. It's why I'm doing this. So I have to say I didn't quite expect this conversation to go this way, and I'm so glad it did. I had all these
Okay.
like, cycle syncing and this and that. It's like, but I can read that. This was much more
Totally.
meaningful, I think, and I
Awesome.
appreciate all of your insight.
Well, thank you for saying that. And actually, that's a great thing to end with, is that when I do podcast interviews, I don't pre-plan a lot of stuff. One, I feel like if you say you're an expert at something, like that should be the easiest thing for you to talk about, right? So like I know my stuff, you can ask me whatever you want and I can handle it. But two is that what my goal is to flow, and that's I think part of the superpower of flowing with your cycle and that feminine flow that we all have access to, regardless of gender, like the feminine side of us, that's the flowing nature, right? And so I can pick up on what you need and what your listeners need, and kind of figure out where the conversation needs to go. If I come in and I am set and things need to go a certain way, I'm not going to serve in the most helpful way possible.
Right.
And so when we start to be like, what am I eating today, or when am I waking up, what's true for me, the flip side is that you get to do stuff like this. You go in and give people, like, I can react to you because I'm used to reacting to me and rolling with the punches and whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. And it begins to work in your favor, and then being of service is just taken up another level, which is a really beautiful place to be.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to say thank you for your time,
because Thanks for having me.
I'm going to keep going if I don't. Yeah. So this was great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, have a great day.
All right. So this is the kind of conversation that never gets old, and that probably needs additional listens in order to let Dr. Alex's expertise and wisdom truly sink in. In the intro, I said this conversation surprised me. And it did, because I went into it prepped with all kinds of questions about cycle syncing, hormones, female health issues, but I came away with a message much more powerful. Dr. Alex and Zesty Ginger's approach to health and wellness completely align with my purpose of doing this show. And that is that everything starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with each of us turning inward and taking a good look around. Asking ourselves, what's going on in my mind, my body, my soul? How is each slice of the pie, as Dr. Alex said, affecting the other? Now, Dr. Alex is a doctor, right? So, of course, there is the actual medical health side of things, which is much of where she gets her expertise and her training and all of that comes in. But I think it's pretty powerful to hear an MD talk about the power of our minds and brains in connection to our health and well-being. Now, I imagine most of us are on the patient side of things. And so I want to reiterate Dr. Alex's perspective on the practitioner's perspective and remind us all that doctors are people too. I interview therapists and talk a lot about humanizing the therapist. And this is the same thing. Doctors are trained a certain way and are given a particular set of tools. And can you imagine how stressful it must be to see clear lab results and have to tell someone, yeah, there's nothing wrong with you. Go ahead. Meanwhile, the person is staring back at you, maybe even in tears, going, but yes, there is. What is going on? Now, that doesn't mean we give up and just accept the information. You heard how Dr. Alex did the exact opposite. But it allows for empathy, right? Something to think about for sure. So I'm going to link some of Zesty Ginger's resources in the show notes, including a free habit guide. And I hope that you will join Dr. Alex, Megan, and likely myself in the masterclass, the challenge, and maybe even the Health Transformation Accelerator, because this stuff matters. You matter. Apparently I matter. I know, I matter. Okay. All right. So let me know what you think. Check out Zesty Ginger on TikTok, Instagram. Head over to their website, their podcast, So much good information. And as always, all of this will be linked in the show notes. And I was going to say I'll catch you next time, but I first want to truly, again, thank Dr. Alex for her time and her insight. It's a really moving conversation. Thank you, and thank you for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.